Hey friends, welcome back to Archetype. I'm super glad that you are listening today. We are in Aries season still in that new beginning, new energy, new cycle energy. And we just moved from 17, the gate that asks you to examine what you think, into gate 21, which is asking you something considerably more uncomfortable. 21 is asking you, can you trust life enough to not grip it? That question is going to land differently for different people. For some of you, it's going to feel like a spiritual invitation, right? And for others, it's going to feel like a threat because gripping is how we do life. Some of us have really good reasons for gripping, right? Life has handed us situations where letting go actually did mean that things fell apart, where we got burned when we trusted, right? We've all got those stories. The one time that we stopped managing everything and something that we cared for slipped through the cracks, right? So the control didn't come from nowhere. It came from experience. It came from learning. But the thing that 21 is pointing at, the strategy that kept you safe at one point, which was brilliant for your system to figure out and introduce, has a cost. And at some point, the cost starts exceeding what you're protecting, right? There's not the return on investment that there once was because you're trying to learn and grow and move into expansive, different places in your life. And those same old strategies that kept you safe can no longer do that. You've outgrown them, but they're stuck there a little bit. So that is what we're working with today. In traditional human design, this gate is called the treasurer. In the traditional I Ching, it's called biting through, which was originally likened to jaws gnawing through a difficult obstacle. So keep that in mind. Gene Key 21 moves from the shadow of control through the gift of authority, and its highest vibration is valor. It lives in the sustainability economic circuit, and that's important. The gate's primary territory is resources, money, time, land, energy, the material world, right? The question that we are always asking underneath everything else is, am I going to be supported? Do I have enough? And can I trust that there will be enough? And when the answer feels uncertain, which it often does in the present moment, the shadow response is to grip tightly, to manage, right? To make sure that nothing moves in your life without your awareness or your approval. Biologically, this gate lives in the thymus gland, and the thymus is the gland responsible for immune function, specifically for teaching your immune system to recognize self, what belongs inside of you and what is actually a threat. Think about that for a second. The control impulse at its biological root is an immune response. It's the body trying to decide what's safe to let in and what needs to be kept out or managed. When this gate is running in the shadow, the immune system of the self is on permanent red alert, right? Everything is a potential threat. Everything needs monitoring. That's fucking exhausting. And it has a real physical cost. Come back to the biology in a second. But first, let's talk about what this actually looks like in the world right now. Because as above, so below, right? What's running in the collective field is running in your own personal nervous system. Same pattern, just a different scale. It's also running at the cellular level. It's also running at the galactic level. Like everyone is going through this at the same time. The world is biting through right now, right? So the I Ching name for this gate is biting through. And if you've been paying any attention to the world lately, that image is everywhere. We are watching governments make unilateral decisions about resources at a pace that's outrunning any kind of oversight or collective type of process. Federal funding being pulled overnight, agencies are being restructured or dissolved by executive orders. Institutions that took decades to get functioning correctly have been dismantled in weeks, and all of it is framed by the people doing it as necessary correction, right? As finally taking control of a system that has been out of control, and time will tell. But that framing is 21st shadow talking. The belief that if you can just get your hands on enough levers, if you can just control enough of the machinery, stability is going to follow that. And it won't. It never does. Because control at that scale always produces the thing that it's trying to prevent: more chaos, more resistance, more unpredictability. The shadow does not understand. The shadow just grips harder. And then the tech consideration piece, a handful of companies, increasingly a handful of individuals, now control the infrastructure of information, communication, finance, and increasingly physical logistics. We have moved in a very short amount of time from a world where power was at least nominally distributed to one where it is being concentrated at a speed and a scale that really has no historic precedent. This is 21 at a every time I try to say this word, civilizational scale. The deep terror that if you don't control resources, someone else is going to, and the belief that controlling them is the same thing as securing them, it's not. And then there's what's happening inside the rest of us. The people that are not running governments or big tech companies in response to all of this. Panic buying, stockpiling. There is an impulse right now to hoard, to secure, to make sure that you have yours before it all runs out, right? The checking of bank accounts 17 times a day, not because you need to, but because the act of checking makes you feel like you're doing something. The obsessive tracking of news cycles because staying informed feels like staying in control, even when the information itself is making you feel less and less safe. That's the shadow that is running the collective nervous system right now. Millions of thymuses all over the world on red alert simultaneously. So fun. As above, so below. The pattern at the top is the pattern in the body, right? And the work we do in the body, genuinely, not metaphorically, is part of what shifts the pattern at the top, which is why we tap. More on that in just a sec. So let's bring this down to the scale that most of us are actually live at, right? Because you don't have to be running a country to be running the 21st shadow. Here are the patterns, which probably are living in your house. The parent who won't stop solving. The kid is struggling with something, a friendship, a homework problem, a hard feeling. And before the kid has even finished the sentence, the parent is already fixing it. And it's not out of cruelty, it's out of love, out of a bone deep inability to watch difficulty without trying to intervene. The control there isn't out loud. It's very quiet. It's tender, but it is still control. And it's quietly teaching the kid that their own capacity to handle things isn't trustworthy. The person who doesn't know how to delegate at work or at home or in some kind of creative project, it just is faster if I do it myself. Nobody else will do it the way it needs to be done. If I have to explain it, I might as well just handle it, right? This one is sneaky because it often looks like competence. It often is competence. But underneath it is a very quiet conviction that the moment that you let go, something's going to go wrong. The one who monitors. I think I show up this way probably the most. This is how this comes out. Not doing everything, but just watching everything. Tracking the emotional temperature of every person in a room. Knowing before anyone says a word that something is off. The vibes are off. Cushioning landings. quietly steering outcomes so that conflict doesn't happen. Feelings don't get hurt. Things don't fall apart. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is often invisible even to the person doing it. It's been called empathy. It's been called being perceptive. It is exhausting and it is control. The relationship manager, the person who has the conversation with their partner in their head 17 times before they say it out loud, rehearsing every possible response and then pre-planning every pivot that the conversation could possibly take. Who monitors how much space they're taking up? Who adjust their needs based on what they think the other person can handle? Who has learned somewhere that their real wants are too much, and so they manage themselves and make themselves smaller in order to keep the relationship feeling safe. The money gripper, the person for whom financial anxiety isn't really about the numbers. It's about the feeling that the floor could drop out at any moment, who checks accounts constantly, not because anything has changed, but because the act of checking creates a momentary illusion of control, who struggles to spend even when they can afford to, because the spending feels like losing their grip on something that might be needed later in case of emergency. And all of these things are the exact same pattern. All of them are the thymus on red alert. All of them are rooted in the same original terror. If I stop managing this, it will not be okay. And this is what 21 wants you to know. That terror makes sense. It came from somewhere real. It was a smart adaptation at the time, but adaptation isn't the same as the truth. The well that we need to be going to that's underneath this is the programming partner of 21, which is 48. It's called the well. The shadow of 48 is inadequacy. Richard Rudd makes a point in one of his books that I think about a lot, that deep down, all tyrants feel inadequate. All of them. The loudest controllers, the most dominating presence, the people gripping the hardest at the bottom of the well, there is always the same thing. And it is a quiet, persistent conviction that they are not enough to handle whatever life might hand them. And this matters because it changes the compassion question. When you seek control in the world, in the people around you, and in yourself, the shadow view says, this is bad, this is wrong, this needs to be stopped, it needs to be fixed or judged. The gift view says, this is someone who doesn't yet trust that they have what it takes. And that doesn't mean control doesn't harm. It really does. It really, really can. Real harm at every scale. Understanding what's underneath it is different from excusing it. And it's the only place where something actually shifts. The well is always full. That is the part that we need to learn how to trust. 48 at the gift level knows this. It knows that the resource is there. Life is always replenishing itself. And that the ground is very stable. The ground will hold you. But you can't feel that from the inside of the shadow, right? From inside the shadow, the well looks like it's about to run dry every moment. So we grip. So we'll tap exactly for that moment. So here's the body components. 21 corresponds to codon 21, which codes for CGG, which is arginine, which we've been, if you were here for 17 last week, you'll remember that arginine showed up there too, which is interesting. 2 consecutive gates, same amino acid, but expressed completely differently through the archetypal territory. 17 was about mental flexibility and the defended opinion. 21 is about control of resources and the fear of not being supported. Same biochemical substrate, different psychological costume. Arginine supports nitric oxide production, so blood flow, immune function, cell communication, supports wound healing and detoxification. And energetically, it's linked to our relationship with power, how we hold power, how we release power, how we move it through the system. When 21 runs in distortion, you see things like hypervigilance, the body in permanent scanning mode, over responsibility, the sense that everything will collapse if you stop holding it, and suppressed creativity because who has time? Because when all of your energy is spent managing outcomes, there's nothing left for the generative stuff. And then you feel that physically, you're not getting the return on investment, right? The jaw doesn't unclench, your body is constantly holding tension, chest stays braced, shoulders are more often up around your ears. So the thymus sits right behind your sternum, it's right behind the breastbone, and there's a reason people instinctively put a hand to their chest when they feel fear or grief or the particular kind of dread that comes with feeling out of control, right? That is the thymus speaking. That's the immune intelligence self-registering threat. When we tap at that collarbone point, which sits just below the thymus, we are talking directly to that system. We're sending a signal that says the threat assessment can update. We do not have to be on high alert. And that is not just a metaphor. That is really like you're talking to your physiology. And then there's a little bit of this ancestral component, right? 21 often shows up in family lines marked by scarcity, real scarcity, not imagined. Lines where resources were genuinely uncertain, where one bad season, one economic collapse, one war meant the difference between surviving or not. The hypervigilance that got passed down through those lines was intelligent and it kept people alive. But the nervous system doesn't automatically update when the original threat is gone. You know, the great grandmother who survived something genuinely terrifying passes that vigilance down through the genome for the epigenome. The grandchild who has never experienced that particular threat still wakes up in the night with a very low hum of dread that they can't explain. They still check accounts. They still can't quite let the meal end without making sure that there's enough food for tomorrow. Culturally, this is the codon ring of humanity. And at the shadow frequency, Rudd says that it shows very well the themes that keep humans as victims. Struggle, self-obsession, constriction, opinion, agitation, and control. These aren't personal failings. They are inherited operating system of a species that spent most of its history genuinely uncertain about survival. But we are not in that situation anymore. Most of us, most of the time, are not actually in survival conditions. But this system just has not been brought up to speed. So part of what we do when we're tapping is update the body's assessment of where and when we actually are, teaching it that the threat that trained you is not the threat that's here now. So when the amygdala goes, shit, I know when this happened before, we can actually calm the limbic system back down. And the highest gift here is authority. And let's sit with that. Authority versus control. Rudd notes that the word authority contains the word author. What is the story you're here to tell? What voice wants to emerge from your depths and lead something, a life, a project, a community toward more light, more expansion? Real authority does not look like control. It looks like steadiness. It's the person in the room who isn't managing anyone, and yet everyone feels more regulated just by being near them. It's the leader who can say, I don't know, without losing the room's trust, you know? It's the parent who can let their kid struggle without immediately rescuing, and who their kid turns to precisely because of that. The paradox that Rudd names is this. When you find the strength to move out of the shadow, it comes from giving up control, not asserting it. You allow the greater power inside of you to shine through. And that power, your actual authority, your actual presence is what creates real safety. Not management, not monitoring, not gripping. The gift knows when to act, when to wait. It knows the difference between intervention and interference. And it trusts, not naively, not without discernment, but it does trust the basic fabric of life to hold. It trusts that the well is full, that life is always replenishing itself, and that the present moment doesn't always look like that. And it trusts in its capacity to handle whatever comes, not because nothing will go wrong, but because it has evidence accumulated over time that it can navigate what goes wrong without pre-controlling every possible outcome. And that trust is what we're building toward. So this week, watch for where you're supported. This one's easy to miss when the shadow is running because the shadow filters it out, but look for the evidence that the well is full. The people who show up for you, the things that work out without your intervention, the moments where life held you without you having to hold it first. And watch how the world is mirroring that back to you. The places where you see control failing, politically and economically and interpersonally, are teaching the same thing that the gate is teaching internally. Grip does not create safety. It creates the illusion of safety while exhausting the gripper. So we're going to tap on all of this now. Meet me in part B in just a moment.